You're not cut out for the boardroom, sweetheart. You're the creative one. Creatives don't run companies. They work for the people who do. My father said that to me on a Tuesday afternoon in March, right after I had just closed the biggest retainer in our company's history, a $2.3 million annual contract with Holloway Brands, a consumer goods conglomerate that had rejected his pitch twice before mine. He was leaning back in his leather chair, fingers laced behind his head, looking at me the way someone looks at a golden retriever that learned a new trick. Impressed, maybe, but not about to let the dog drive the car. I smiled and said nothing. I picked up the signed contract, whopped it to the filing cabinet, and went back to my desk. That was 6 months before everything burned down. Had you ever worked so hard for something that the work became invisible? Not because it was bad, but because it was so good nobody could imagine the place existing without it? Drop a yes in the comments if you know exactly what I'm talking about. My name is Emma Hartley. I'm 29 years old, and for 4 years I built my family's branding agency from a regional boutique into one of the most respected mid-market firms in the Southeast. I developed the methodology we sold. I trained the team that executed it. I wrote the case studies that won the award sitting in the lobby. And for 4 years I did all of it as a 1099 independent contractor, because my father decided, somewhere between paying my brother's health insurance and funding their Roth IRAs, that I was a different category of person. To understand how this ended, you first have to understand what I built. When I joined Hartley Creative 6 years ago, fresh out of a brand strategy program at the University of Virginia, the company had 11 clients, one junior designer, and a pitch deck my father had been using since 2014, with only the fonts updated. My father, Gerald Hartley, was a gifted salesman. He could walk into any room, shake any hand, and make a prospective client feel like they were being let in on a secret. My brothers Marcus and Derek inherited that same magnetism, the easy confidence, the expensive haircuts, the ability to talk for 40 minutes without saying anything that could be held against them later. What none of them had was a system. That's what I brought. I spent my first 3 months auditing every client account, every deliverable, every invoice. I mapped the gaps, the redundancies, the places where the agency was bleeding talent and credibility simultaneously. Then I built what I eventually called the Signal Framework, a proprietary brand strategy methodology that took a client from audience research through positioning, identity, messaging, and measurement in a structured, repeatable, transferable process. It was elegant. It was mine. And within 18 months of implementing it, Hartley Creative's average retainer size had tripled. My father loved to present the Signal Framework at pitches. He would stand at the front of a conference room, clicking through slides I had built, explaining a process I had designed, using language I had written, and he was magnetic doing it. Clients believed in it because they believed in him. When they hired us, though, they got me. I was the one in their offices every other week. I was the one their marketing directors called at 7 in the morning when a campaign went sideways. I was the one who stayed up until midnight before their product launches, cross-referencing messaging documents against legal compliance requirements, because Derek had forgotten, again, to loop in the client's legal team before we went live. I was the one who knew which of our clients was going through a divorce and needed to be handled gently, and which one was in acquisition talks and needed everything buttoned up tight and fast. Marcus and Derek were the faces. I was the company. And yet, the first time I noticed the disparity, I told myself there was a reasonable explanation. I had come across a vendor invoice that accidentally included an internal payment summary. Marcus's monthly draw, $14,000. Derek's, $12,000. Mine, $6,000, flat, no benefits, no equity, no retirement contribution. I had been classified as a contractor from my first day, a status my father had explained as flexibility and entrepreneurial, a way for me to build my own book of business while contributing to the family company. I did not have my own book of business. I had their book of business, which I was building every single day. I brought it up once, carefully, over dinner. Not in the office, because I understood optics. I said I wanted to talk about transitioning to an employee classification, about formalizing my role, about equity participation given the revenue growth of the past 2 years. My father listened with the patient expression of someone waiting for a child to finish a sentence they've heard before. Then he said the border line, the creative line, the line about how people like me work for people like them. Marcus laughed. Not meanly. Just easily, the way people laugh when they're not the one being dismissed. I let it go. I told myself I was being strategic. I told myself that patience was its own kind of power. I told myself a lot of things that were not quite true. The crack appeared on a Wednesday in September. We had been shortlisted for a National Industry Award, the Meridian Award for Brand Strategy Excellence, given out every year at the Meridian Summit in Atlanta, the most important gathering in our sector. 1,200 brand strategists, TMOs, and agency principals in one ballroom. The kind of room that could define a company's trajectory for the next decade. The submission that got us shortlisted was a case study I'd written. The methodology featured was the Signal framework. The client results cited were from accounts I managed. My name appeared nowhere on the submission. When I pointed this out to my father, he nodded thoughtfully and said that submissions were filed under the company name, not individual contributors. Which was technically true. Then he mentioned that Marcus would be accepting the award if we won, because Marcus had the right presence for that kind of visibility. I remember looking at him for a long moment and thinking, he genuinely believes this is fair. That was somehow worse than if he had known it wasn't. Then came the Holloway situation. Holloway Brands was our anchor client. The $2.3 million retainer. The deal that let my father renovate the office and bump Derek's draw to $12,000 a month. I had won them, built the relationship from scratch, managed their account through a CEO transition, a brand refresh, and a product recall that could have destroyed the relationship but didn't because I was on a plane to their headquarters in Cincinnati the morning the story broke. I had been their primary contact for 3 years. In October, I found out my father had restructured the account. He had put Marcus on as lead contact. Didn't tell me. Didn't tell Holloway's marketing director directly. Just quietly shifted the org chart, sent a new client success team introduction email with Marcus's photo and bio at the top. Mine listed third, after Derek, under strategy support. Their marketing director, a woman named Claudia who I had worked closely with for 3 years, called me directly. She was confused. She was polite about it, but I could hear the concern underneath the politeness. She asked if I was still going to be leading the strategy work. I told her yes, and I believed it when I said it. Then I walked into my father's office and asked him to explain the restructure. He told me Holloway had reached a scale where they needed an account lead with more executive presence. He used the word presence 3 times in 4 sentences. What he meant was that they needed a man in a nice suit to take Claudia to lunch, and he had decided I was not that. And then, and this is the part that ended the chapter, he said, "You're better in the background, Emma." That's not an insult. Some people are architects, and some people are the face on the billboard. You're an architect. Be proud of that. Architect. Not director. Not owner. Architect of someone else's building. I heard a door close somewhere inside me. Not with a slam. Quietly. The way a door closes when the person leaving has already decided they're not coming back. I said, "I understand." I went back to my desk. And then I did something I had never done before. I pulled up the independent contractor agreement I'd signed 4 years earlier, and I read every single word. It was 6 pages. Standard boilerplate, the kind of document you could find by Googling, freelance contractor agreement template, and downloading the first result for free. I read it twice. Then I took a photograph of page 4 with my phone and texted it to my college roommate Priya, who was now an intellectual property attorney at a firm in Charlotte. I typed, "Read Clause 7. Tell me what you see." She called me back in 11 minutes. "Emma," she said, "where did your dad get this contract?" "I think he wrote it himself. Or downloaded it." "Why?" There was a pause. "Because Clause 7 has a standard work for hire provision, which would normally assign everything you create to the company, except," another pause, the sound of paper. "He forgot to include you as a named party in the assignment. The clause is written in the passive voice, referencing all works created by employees and contractors of Hartley Creative, but you signed this as an independent contractor, not under the company entity. There's no explicit assignment from you, Emma. No transfer of rights." I felt something shift in the back of my brain, like tumblers in a lock. "So what does that mean?" I asked, even though I already suspected. "It means under the Copyright Act, anything you created as an independent contractor with your own time, your own expertise, before it was formally transferred, belongs to you by default. Work for hire only applies automatically to employees. For contractors, there has to be a written agreement explicitly transferring rights. He doesn't have one." She paused again. "Emma, what exactly have you been creating for them?" "A methodology," I said. "A complete brand strategy system. Training materials. Client-facing frameworks. Case studies. The whole operating system of the company, basically. Priya was quiet for a moment. "Come to Charlotte," she said, "and bring everything you've ever written." I want to tell you that the next part felt triumphant. It didn't, not at first. It felt like grief. I sat in Priya's conference room for 2 hours, going through a portfolio drive I had maintained meticulously for 4 years. Every framework document, every training deck, every Signal framework module with its original file creation date showing my name in the metadata. It felt like looking at 4 years of your life and realizing you had been told to belong to someone else, and that it hadn't, and that the person who told you that was your father. I cried once. Briefly, in the bathroom, with the water running for about 90 seconds. Then I washed my face, went back to the conference room, and told Priya to register all of it. We filed for copyright registration on the Signal framework and all associated materials. 17 documents in total with the U.S. Copyright Office. Expedited processing. It cost just under $1,000. While we waited for processing, I did 2 other things. First, I reviewed my email archives. 4 years of messages, and I was methodical about it. The way I had always been methodical about everything. What I found was a quiet, consistent record of my father's voice in written form, the 11,000 his a PM emails that started with, "Why isn't this done yet?" the reply all messages in which my analysis was attributed to Marcus in front of clients. The thread where he had told me to rework a proposal I had spent 2 weeks on because Derek thought the language felt too feminine for the target client. I flagged 41 emails. I saved them to an encrypted external drive. Second, I filed the incorporation papers for Hartley Signal LLC. It took 20 minutes and $150 in state filing fees. I was officially in business for myself. And unlike my father, I had a real attorney write my contractor agreements. The Meridian Summit was in November. 4 weeks after my conversation with Priya, the shortlist announcement had already gone public. Hartley Creative was one of 5 finalists. The awards ceremony was on the second night of the conference, in the main ballroom of the Grand Hyatt Atlanta. I bought a ticket with my own money. Not as a Hartley Creative representative. As an individual attendee, I wore a dark green dress, structured, the color of someone who has made a decision. My father didn't know I was there until I was already in the room. The Grand Hyatt Ballroom held about 800 people for the seated dinner, round tables with white linens, the soft noise of industry conversations, the specific low-grade anxiety of a room full of people waiting to find out if they won. Marcus and Derek were at a front table with my father, all 3 of them in navy suits, looking relaxed and collegial, and exactly like what they wanted to be. A successful family agency at the top of its game. I saw the moment my father noticed me. He was talking to someone across the table when his eyes moved across the room and stopped. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He held my gaze for just a beat too long, and then he turned back to his conversation, and I saw his jaw tighten slightly. He thought I was there to be managed. He thought I was there because I couldn't help myself, because I was the kind of person who needed acknowledgement, who had come to watch the award I deserved be given to people who didn't build it. He did not know that before I sat down for dinner, I had stopped at the table of Holloway Brand's chief marketing officer, a man named Raymond Whitfield, who had been Claudia's boss and who had attended the summit every year for a decade. I handed him a thin folder. Inside it was a 1-page summary of the Signal framework, a copyright registration certificate dated 6 days earlier, and a letter from Priya's firm on official letterhead. Raymond read it slowly. Then he looked up. "Is this real?" he said. "Every dollar Holloway Brands has paid Hartley Creative for strategic methodology services," I said, "has paid for the licensed use of intellectual property that belongs to me, not the agency. I have the documentation." He turned the letter over in his hands. "What do you want?" "I want you to know," I said, "because in about 40 minutes, things are going to change publicly, and I wanted Holloway to have context before they read about it." Raymond Whitfield was a man who had survived 3 corporate restructurings and 2 hostile acquisition attempts. He had not gotten to his position by panicking. He read the letter again, set it face down on the table and said, "I'll be at your table after dinner." I thanked him and went to find my seat. The awards portion of the evening started at 9 p.m. Brand Strategy Excellence was the 4th category. The presenter read the finalists' names. When she said Hartley Creative, the table near the front erupted in applause, my father beaming, Marcus already straightening his jacket, Derek looking around to see who was watching. And then she said, "And the Meridian Award goes to Hartley Creative for the Signal framework." The applause was generous. Marcus stood first, which he had clearly rehearsed, and the three of them moved toward the stage, my father in the center, my brothers flanking him like they always did, like decorative pillars holding up a facade. My father took the microphone. He thanked clients. He thanked the committee. He talked about the vision of Hartley Creative, the culture of excellence, the importance of having the right people in the right roles. He paused meaningfully at that last line. He did not say my name. The signal framework, he said, represents everything we believe about brand strategy, clarity, precision, discipline. It's what separates this agency from everyone else in this room. He held up the award. The room applauded. I stood up. It wasn't theatrical. I didn't rush the stage. I simply walked to the side aisle, stepped up the 2 stairs to the platform level, and spoke at a volume that carried. I have to make a brief statement on behalf of the intellectual property owner of the signal framework. The applause sputtered and died. My father turned. His face moved through surprise, then recognition, then fury. But we were in front of 800 people, and every instinct he had was about optics, so he held the fury just below the surface, which is somehow more frightening than if he'd let it out. The event coordinator started toward me. I spoke faster, clearly, without drama. My name is Emma Hartley. I am the creator and copyright holder of the Signal Framework, registered with the United States Copyright Office. I worked for Hartley Creative as a 1099 independent contractor for 4 years. Under the Copyright Act, work created by an independent contractor does not automatically transfer to a commissioning party without a written assignment agreement. No such agreement exists. The intellectual property being celebrated tonight belongs to me. Silence. The kind of silence that is not quiet at all, but full of 800 people processing simultaneously. My father stepped forward and said quietly enough that most people couldn't hear, "You are embarrassing this family." I looked at him. "You classified me as a contractor to save money on payroll taxes. That choice had a legal consequence you didn't anticipate. I didn't make the rules. You did." A woman at the front table, I later learned she was the chair of the summit's advisory board, raised her hand almost reflexively. "Is this a legal dispute currently before a court?" "It will be," I said. But I wanted the industry to have context before the award was accepted on behalf of a company that doesn't own what's being awarded. My father leaned toward the microphone. "This is a family matter. Family members don't receive 1099 forms," I said. "Contractors do." Raymond Whitfield stood up from his table. Not dramatically, just stood. Every eye in the room moved to him because Raymond Whitfield's presence in any room meant something, and everyone there knew it. "I'll be speaking with our outside counsel tonight," he said. He said it to no one in particular and everyone in general. Then he sat back down. That was enough. The energy in the room shifted the way pressure shifts before a storm. Not visible, but completely felt. My father had spent 20 years cultivating a reputation in this industry. Reputation is not a thing you lose all at once. It's a thing that changes in the minds of the people who hold it. One room at a time, one moment at a time, one moment at a time. This was a room of 1,200 people. My father handed the award to Marcus, stepped off the stage, and walked toward me. His voice was below a whisper. "I will bury you," he said. "You have nothing without this company." I thought about the 53 client accounts I had personally managed. I thought about Claudia at Holloway, who had called me because she trusted me, not Marcus. I thought about the 17 copyright registrations on a hard drive in my bag. "I have everything," I said. "I built it. I just didn't know I owned it yet." I walked off the stage and out of the ballroom. Raymond Whitfield and 2 of his colleagues were in the lobby 30 seconds later. We talked for an hour. By the end of that conversation, Holloway Brands had agreed to a transitional services arrangement with Hartley Signal LLC, pending formal legal resolution. The value of that arrangement was $1.9 million annually. 3 other agencies in that building reached out to me before I left Atlanta, not because they had seen a spectacle, but because they had seen the spectacle, but because they had seen the Signal framework in action for 3 years and they knew exactly what it was worth. The fallout was extensive and, frankly, was everything my father had always been afraid of. Price firm filed the IP dispute the following week. Hartley Creative's existing client contracts were reviewed and found to contain the Signal framework by name in the service descriptions, which meant every active retainer was encumbered by the IP question. 3 clients paused invoices pending resolution. Their lender reviewed the situation and tightened their credit line. Within 30 days, Hartley Creative was in a cash flow crisis they had not anticipated, because their operating infrastructure had been built on a foundation they had never technically owned. My father called once. He offered equity, 30%, which is what I should have had from the beginning. I told him the offer was 4 years too late, and several $1,000,000 short of acknowledging what had actually happened. He told me I was being vindictive. I told him I was being accurate. Marcus called twice. I did not answer. Derek texted an apology that was 9 sentences long and contained the word honestly 4 times, which told me it was not honest at all. Hartley Signal LLC closed its first full year with 11 clients and $2.4 million in revenue. The Signal framework, my framework, was licensed to 4 of those clients directly. Priya became my outside counsel and also, eventually, one of my clients when her firm decided to rebuild their own brand positioning. I still drive past the Hartley Creative office sometimes. The sign is the same. The parking lot is smaller. They downsized the space 6 months after the Atlanta summit. My father is still there, still selling, still building things in conference rooms with his hands moving and his voice carrying and his charm doing the work that charm can do. But the methodology in that pitch deck, the framework on that slide, it still belongs to me. And now they pay me for it. There is a version of this story where I am the villain, where I ambushed my father at a public event for personal revenge, where I chose spectacle over resolution, where I burned a family relationship to the ground over a compensation dispute that could have been resolved quietly. I understand that version. I thought about it a lot in the weeks between Priya's phone call and the Atlanta summit. Here is what I decided. Quiet resolution requires both parties to agree that something is wrong. My father never agreed. He believed, genuinely and completely, that what he had done was reasonable, was fair, was even generous, that I should be grateful to have been allowed to build something inside his walls with his name on the door. No private conversation was going to change that belief. He had to be in a room where the belief had consequences. What I did in Atlanta was not revenge. It was accountability, delivered in the only venue that would make it legible to him. The contractor classification was supposed to keep me small and movable and easy to erase. He forgot one thing. When you make someone a contractor instead of an employee, you're not just saving money on payroll taxes. You are legally acknowledging that they are an independent creator. And independent creators own what they make. I am Emma Hartley. I am not background. I am not support staff. I am not the architect of someone else's building. I am the building.